The rain hadn't let up all morning. It drummed against the bus windows like impatient fingers, blurring the world outside into streaks of gray and green. Inside, a small family huddled together near the back. 2 tired-looking adults and 2 wide-eyed kids, one clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear missing, the other pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Their clothes were damp from the walk to the stop, and the duffel bag between their feet had seen better days, its strap held together with duct tape. They'd been traveling since before sunrise. A sudden hospital visit the night before, a missed train, a canceled ride. Everything had gone sideways. But they still had that one thing. A crumpled hotel voucher tucked in the mother's wallet, printed years ago during a rare vacation they'd almost forgotten. Crestmere Hotel, it read, with a promise of 1 free night's stay. It felt like a lifeline. By the time they stepped off the bus in the city center, the rain had softened to a mist, but their shoes squelched with every step. The Crestmere loomed ahead, a tall, elegant building with gleaming glass doors and a doorman in a crisp uniform. The kids gaped at the chandeliers visible through the lobby windows, their reflections warped in the polished marble floors. The father squeezed his wife's hand gently. "We'll be okay," he murmured, more to himself than to her. Inside, the air smelled like lemon polish and something faintly floral. Soft piano music drifted from hidden speakers. People in sharp suits and designer coats moved through the space like they owned it. The family paused just inside the entrance, water dripping from their jackets onto the pristine floor. A few guests glanced over, some with curiosity, others with thinly veiled annoyance. At the front desk, a young woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a name tag that read Trina tapped her nails against the counter, scrolling through her phone between check-ins. She didn't look up right away when the family approached. When she finally did, her smile was polite but didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice clipped. The mother stepped forward, pulling the voucher from her wallet with slightly trembling fingers. "Hi, we have this." "That's a loyalty voucher. We were told it never expires. We just need a room for tonight. We've been on the road since yesterday." Trina took the paper without a word, glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds, then set it down like it was covered in dust. "That's outdated," she said flatly. "We don't honor those anymore." "But the website said," the father began. "The system says it's invalid," Trina cut in, already turning back to her screen. "Sorry." The younger child, the boy, let out a small, confused laugh, nervous, not mocking. It was the kind of giggle kids make when they're overwhelmed and don't know what else to do. Trina looked up, saw the boy grinning shyly, and then, without warning, let out a short, sharp laugh of her own. Not kind, not amused, more like disbelief mixed with scorn. She leaned toward a co-worker standing nearby and whispered something just loud enough to carry. "Can you believe they thought they could just walk in here like this?" The co-worker smirked. The family froze, the mother's face flushed. She pulled her kids closer, shielding them with her body as if Trina's words were physical blows. The father opened his mouth to protest, to plead, maybe just to ask for another chance, but no sound came out. What could he say? They looked exactly like what they were, exhausted, underdressed, out of place. Near the lobby's far corner, a man in a worn navy windbreaker sat on a low couch, nursing a paper cup of coffee. He'd been there for nearly an hour, pretending to read a newspaper, but his eyes had been quietly taking in everything. The bellhops, the concierge, the way guests were greeted, or not. His name was Elias, though no one here knew it. He owned this hotel. All of them, actually, the entire Crestmere chain. But today he was just another traveler, testing what his staff really thought when no one in charge was watching. He'd seen the family come in, noticed how the little girl kept smoothing her brother's damp hair, how the parents exchanged a look that said, "We'll figure this out," and then he saw Trina's reaction. The laugh, the whisper, the dismissal. His stomach tightened. He watched as the father quietly gathered their duffel bag, as the mother bent to zip up her daughter's jacket, as the kids looked down at their shoes like they'd done something wrong just by existing here. They turned to leave, shoulders slumped, already bracing for the cold and the rain again. Elias set his coffee down. He stood, walked over, not too fast, not too dramatic, and stopped a few feet from the family. "Excuse me," he said, voice calm and warm. "I couldn't help but overhear. If it's just for one night, I'd be happy to cover your room." All 4 of them looked at him startled. The parents exchanged another glance, this one full of caution. Strangers offering help in fancy hotels didn't usually end well in their experience. It's really no trouble, Elias added gently. I've got a few unused points. Happens all the time. Trina, still at the desk, rolled her eyes so slightly it was almost invisible, but not quite. She typed something into her computer with exaggerated slowness, clearly annoyed at the interruption. The father hesitated, then nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. That's very kind. Elias smiled. Just a small, genuine thing, and turned to Trina. Let's get them checked in, please. Trina sighed through her nose but pulled up a new screen. She didn't apologize. Didn't offer a room upgrade or even a towel for their wet clothes. She processed the reservation with mechanical efficiency, handed over 2 key cards without a word, and turned back to her screen as if they'd already vanished. As the family followed a bellhop toward the elevators, the little girl glanced back once, at the grand lobby, at the cold desk, at the man in the windbreaker who'd stepped in when no one else would. She didn't know who he was, but in that moment she felt seen, and somewhere behind the front desk, a seed of discomfort had been planted, not just in Elias, but in the quiet space between what a hotel promised and how it actually treated people who needed it most. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Crestmere Hotel lobby, turning the marble floors into rivers of gold. The piano music was back, soft and steady, and the scent of fresh coffee drifted from the cafe corner. Everything looked perfect, polished, peaceful, like nothing unpleasant had ever happened here. But Elias couldn't shake what he'd seen the day before. He sat in his office on the top floor, though he hadn't changed out of his simple clothes yet. The windbreaker was gone, replaced by a soft sweater and dark slacks, but he still felt the weight of yesterday's moment like a stone in his chest. He'd built this hotel and the others like it, not just to make money, but to create a place where people felt safe, respected, even if just for a night. Somewhere along the way, that idea had gotten lost in the shine of chandeliers and the crispness of linen. Downstairs, the family was still here. He checked. They'd slept through the night without disturbance, ordered room service, just toast and fruit, and kept to themselves. Good. They deserved peace. But their quiet presence reminded him of something deeper. Hospitality wasn't about how you treated the guests who arrived in luxury cars. It was about how you treated the ones who showed up with nothing but hope and a crumpled piece of paper. By mid-morning, Elias made a decision. He called an unscheduled meeting, not with executives or investors, but with the frontline staff, front desk, concierge, housekeeping leads. He didn't announce himself as the owner, not yet. He wanted them to speak freely. In the small training room behind the lobby, 10 employees gathered, confused but curious. Trina was there, arms crossed, checking her phone under the table. Elias stood at the front, still in plain clothes, holding a remote. I want to show you something, he said, voice calm. He clicked a button, and the screen lit up with grainy security footage, the lobby from yesterday afternoon. There was the family, wet and weary, approaching the desk. There was Trina, glancing up with that practiced half-smile. And then the laugh, the whisper, the way the children shrank back. A few people shifted in their seats. One housekeeper looked down, shaking her head slightly. Trina stiffened but didn't say a word. This isn't about blame, Elias continued. It's about who we are, or who we're supposed to be. He let the silence hang for a moment. Then he asked, what do you see when you watch this? One of the bellhops spoke first. I see folks who needed help, and didn't get it. Another staffer, older with tired eyes but a kind voice, added, I've seen that look before. That's the look of people who've been told no too many times already. Trina finally looked up. They didn't belong here, she said, voice tight. They had no reservation, no proper ID, clothes soaked, they could have been anyone. I was protecting the hotel's standards. Standards? Elias asked gently. Or assumptions? She didn't answer. Then he did something no one expected. He walked to the front of the room, took a deep breath, and said, My name is Elias Croft. I own this hotel. And I was sitting right there. He pointed to the corner of the screen, watching all of it happen. Gasps. Wide eyes. Trina's face went pale. I started with one little motel 20 years ago, he went on, his voice steady but warm. No marble. No chandeliers. Just clean sheets and hot water. One night, a man showed up, homeless, sick, barely able to stand. My staff wanted to turn him away, but I let him stay, in my own room. He stayed 3 nights. On the last morning, he handed me a folded napkin with his social security number written on it. Said, "If I ever get back on my feet, I'll pay you double." He never did, but he sent me a postcard a year later, from a job he'd landed, a room he could finally call his own. That napkin's framed in my office. He looked around the room. That's the heart of this business. Not perfection, not appearances, people. He paused, then said, "Effective immediately, we're rolling out a guest dignity policy. No guest will be turned away without being heard. No voucher will be dismissed without verification. And every team member will go through empathy training, not as punishment, but as a reminder." He turned to Trina. "You won't be fired. But for the next week, you'll shadow housekeeping, maintenance, and night security. You'll see what happens after check-in. You'll hear the stories behind the guests. Because real service isn't just a smile at the desk. It's understanding why someone's standing there in the first place." Trina looked stunned. Angry, maybe, but also shaken. Later that afternoon, Elias knocked on the family's door. The father opened it, cautious but polite. Elias didn't come in, just stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets. "I wanted to make sure you were doing okay," he said simply. The mother appeared behind her husband, holding a steaming mug. "We are," she said softly. "Better than we've been in weeks." They talked for a few minutes, just small things. The kids were napping. The hospital visit had been for the grandmother. She was stable now. They'd missed their connection because the bus broke down. The father had just lost his job after taking too much time off to care for his mom. They were heading to a cousin's place tomorrow, hoping to find work. Elias listened. Really listened. Not as a hotel owner, but as a person. Before he left, the little girl peeked out from behind her mom. "Are you the nice man from yesterday?" she asked. He smiled. "Yeah. Just a guy who believes everyone deserves a dry place to sleep." Back in his office, Elias stared out at the city skyline. He thought about Trina's words. They didn't belong here. But who decided that? Was it the clothes? The shoes? The size of their wallet? If that was the standard, then the whole idea of hospitality had become a performance, not a promise. That evening, as the sun dipped below the buildings, Trina stood outside the housekeeping closet, holding a stack of fresh towels. She'd been told to follow Rosa, the head housekeeper, for the next few hours. Rosa didn't say much at first, just handed her a cart and started knocking on doors. Room 312, an elderly woman recovering from surgery, barely able to lift her water glass. Rosa refilled it without being asked. Room 205, a young couple whispering in hushed, tearful voices, just lost their baby. Rosa left extra tissues and turned down the lights without a word. Room 418, a teenager alone, scrolling through job listings on a cracked phone. Rosa left a complimentary snack pack and a note. "Hang in there." Trina watched, silent. These weren't just rooms. They were lives. Messy, fragile, complicated lives. And then Rosa stopped outside room 309, the family's room. "They're good people," she said quietly. Quiet, grateful, left a thank you note for the front desk. She handed Trina a small folded paper. Found it under the pillow. Trina opened it. In neat, careful handwriting, the mother had written, "Thank you for your kindness. It meant more than you know." Trina's throat tightened. She hadn't done anything kind, but someone had covered for her. And these people she'd judged in seconds, had thanked the hotel anyway. For the first time, she wondered what it must feel like to walk into a place like this when you have nothing left to give. And for the first time, she felt ashamed, not because she'd been caught, but because she'd failed to see them as people at all. The week passed slower than Trina expected. Every morning she traded her front desk blazer for a plain gray uniform and followed the housekeeping team through hallways she'd only ever seen from the elevator. At first she kept her head down, arms crossed like she was serving a sentence, but the longer she walked those quiet corridors, the harder it became to stay closed off. She saw things she'd never noticed before. The way the night porter saved leftover breakfast pastries for a regular guest who couldn't afford room service. How the laundry staff mended torn pillowcases instead of tossing them. The way Rosa, the head housekeeper, always paused outside rooms where guests had been crying. just long enough to leave an extra bottle of water or a folded blanket. One afternoon, while restocking towels in a supply closet, Trina overheard two veteran staff talking in hushed tones. "Remember that family last winter?" one said. "The one sleeping in their car? Management let them stay 3 nights free after the storm." "Yeah," the other replied. "And that college kid who got stranded after his wallet was stolen? We gave him a job cleaning rooms till his ride came." Trina froze, towel in hand. She'd never heard these stories. At the front desk, it was all about occupancy rates, upsells, and keeping the lobby presentable. No one talked about the people behind the room numbers. Later that day, she passed the front desk, her old post, and saw a new face behind the counter. A temporary replacement, she guessed. The sight stung more than she thought it would. Not because she missed the authority, but because she realized how little she'd actually known about the job. She'd been guarding a door, not welcoming guests. Meanwhile, Elias kept his distance. He didn't check in on Trina or make grand speeches. He trusted the work to speak for itself. Instead, he focused on building the new guest dignity policy into something real, not just words on a memo, but a living practice. He met with department heads, revised training modules, and even added a small emergency fund for guests facing sudden hardship. No questions asked. Just help. He also made one quiet call. 2 days later, a package arrived at the front desk addressed to the Henderson family. Inside was a care kit, warm socks, travel-sized toiletries, a children's book, and a handwritten note. "For your journey ahead. You're stronger than you know." Elias didn't sign it. He didn't need to. Back in their room, the family unpacked the gift with quiet wonder. The little girl hugged the book like it was treasure. The father stared at the note for a long time, then tucked it into his wallet, right next to the expired voucher. On Friday evening, Trina finished her shift early. She sat alone in the staff break room, sipping lukewarm tea, replaying the week in her head. She thought about the elderly guest who'd thanked her for simply holding the elevator. The teenager who'd smiled when she left him an extra soda. The way the Henderson kids had waved at her in the hallway that morning, not with fear but with shy friendliness. She hadn't done anything special. Just showed up, listened, tried, but that was the point, wasn't it? That night she stayed late after her shift ended. In the quiet of the empty lobby, she sat at a small desk near the back office and pulled out a sheet of hotel stationery. Her pen hovered for a long time. She wasn't used to writing things that mattered. Most of her notes were reservation confirmations or maintenance requests. Finally, she began. "To the family who stayed in room 309, I owe you an apology. When you walked in, I saw your clothes, your wet shoes, your tired faces, and I made a judgment. I assumed you didn't belong here. But you did. You belong just as much as anyone else. Maybe more because you came with nothing but hope, and you still treated everyone with kindness, even me. I'm learning that a hotel isn't just a place to sleep. It's a place where people land when life gets heavy, and my job isn't to decide who's worthy of shelter. It's to offer it. Thank you for teaching me that." She didn't sign it with her full name, just a staff member who's trying to do better. She sealed the envelope, wrote "For the Henderson family, if they return" on the front, and left it with the night manager. She didn't expect them to come back. But if they did, she wanted them to know. Someone had changed because of them. The next morning, Elias walked through the lobby during his usual early rounds. He noticed the envelope on the front desk and picked it up gently. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. He could see the care in the handwriting, the weight in the crease of the paper. He handed it back to the manager. "Keep this safe," he said. "And if they ever return, make sure they get it." Later that day, during a team huddle, Elias announced the official launch of the Second Chance Stay program, a quiet initiative offering 1 free night per year to guests facing emergencies, no proof required. Just a conversation. Just trust. Trina stood at the back of the group listening. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was just filling a role. She felt like she was part of something real. That weekend, the Henderson family checked out. They left the room spotless, beds neatly made, trash emptied. On the nightstand, they'd left another thank you note, this time for the entire staff. And tucked beneath it was a small drawing from the little girl, a hotel with a rainbow above it and 3 stick figures holding hands in front of the door. One had a windbreaker, one had a gray uniform. and the family stood in the middle. When Rosa found it, she showed it to Trina without a word. Trina stared at the drawing, eyes burning. She didn't cry. She wasn't that kind of person. But something inside her cracked open just enough to let in a little light. She pinned the drawing to the staff bulletin board, right next to the schedule. No explanation. Just the picture, the colors bright against the white paper. People noticed. Some smiled. Some nodded. No one said anything out loud. But from that day on, whenever someone at the front desk felt tempted to judge a guest by their appearance, they'd glance at that drawing. And remember, Elias saw it too. He didn't make a speech. He just stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking at the rainbow, the stick figures, the quiet message it carried. Hospitality wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up for others and for yourself when it mattered most. And sometimes all it took was one family, one rainy day, and one moment of shame turned into a chance to grow. Weeks passed and the Crestmere Hotel settled into a new rhythm. The Second Chance Stay program quietly took root, not with fanfare, but with small acts. A night clerk offering a warm room to a bus driver stranded by a snowstorm. A concierge helping a teenager find a shelter after a family argument. A housekeeper leaving extra blankets for a guest shivering in thin clothes. No one made a show of it. It just became part of how things were done. Trina returned to the front desk, but she wasn't the same. She still wore the same uniform, still handled the same check-ins and check-outs, but something had shifted. She looked people in the eye now, not to size them up, but to see them. She asked gentle questions. Long trip? Need help with your bags? Is this your first time in the city? Simple things, but said like she meant them. She kept the drawing from the little girl pinned above her workstation. Some guests noticed it and smiled. Others asked about it. She never gave the full story, just said, "It reminds me why I do this job." One rainy Tuesday, almost exactly a month after the Henderson family's visit, Trina was working the evening shift when the automatic doors slid open. A familiar duffel bag came in first, then two kids, a little taller now, wearing clean jackets and matching backpacks. Behind them walked the parents, shoulders straighter, faces less tired. The father carried a small bouquet of wildflowers, probably from a roadside stand. Trina's breath caught. She didn't say anything at first, just watched as they approached, water dripping from their hoods onto the marble. The little girl spotted the drawing still pinned up and tugged her brother's sleeve. "Look! It's still there!" Trina stepped out from behind the desk, something she rarely did, and met them halfway. "You're back," she said, voice softer than she intended. The mother smiled. "We are. Got a job offer nearby. Thought we'd celebrate our first week with a night somewhere nice." Trina nodded, throat tight. She didn't mention the apology letter she'd written. Didn't bring up the past. Instead, she turned to her computer, typed quickly, and said, "I have a suite available on the 9th floor. Quiet, with a view of the park. It's yours for the night. On the house, from management." The father started to protest, but Trina held up a hand. "Consider it a welcome home." She handed them the key cards, then reached under the counter and pulled out the envelope she'd left weeks ago. "This is for you," she said, placing it gently on the counter. "I wrote it after you left. I hope it's okay." The mother took it, opened it slowly, and read it standing right there. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening. "Thank you," she said simply. "That means more than you know." As they headed toward the elevators, the little boy turned and waved. "Bye. Thanks for the rainbow room." Trina smiled, a real one this time, and waved back. Upstairs, the family unpacked in silence for a few minutes. The suite was beautiful, soft lighting, thick carpets, a balcony with city lights twinkling in the distance. The mother sat on the edge of the bed and reread the letter. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her purse. "They changed," the father said quietly, watching the kids explore the room. "Yeah," she replied. "But so did we." Meanwhile, Elias watched from his office window. He'd seen them arrive. Seen Trina step out from behind the desk, seen the quiet exchange. He didn't interfere, didn't need to. The moment belonged to them. Later that night, after the family had ordered dinner and the kids were asleep, Elias knocked on their door. This time they invited him in. They talked like old friends, about the new job, the apartment they'd found, how the grandmother was doing much better. The father even joked about how he'd practiced tying his tie in the bus station bathroom before the interview. Elias listened, sipping the tea the mother offered. Then he said, "You know, you didn't just get a room that first night. You reminded us who we're supposed to be." The mother shook her head. "We didn't do anything special." "You showed up," Elias said, "with nothing but dignity and hope. And you were kind, even when you weren't treated kindly. That's rare. And powerful." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the hum of the city outside a gentle backdrop. Before he left, Elias handed the father a small card. "If you ever need a reference, a place to stay, or just someone to talk to, call me, anytime." The father took it, nodded slowly. "Thank you for seeing us." Back in the hallway, Elias paused. He thought about how easy it would have been for the family to never return, to write off the whole experience as another moment of shame in a world that often makes people feel small. But they came back. Not for revenge, not for recognition, but because they believed in second chances, and in doing so, they gave others the chance to grow. The next morning, the family checked out again. This time, they left a small potted plant on the front desk with a note. "For the lobby. To grow something beautiful." Trina placed it right under the drawing. Word of the second chance stay began to spread, not through ads but through word of mouth. A social worker called to ask if they could refer clients. A bus driver mentioned it to a stranded passenger. Even other hotels started asking how Crestmere was handling guest crises with such grace. Elias never took credit. He simply said, "We're learning to lead with heart." And Trina? She started mentoring new hires, not just on procedures, but on presence. "Your job isn't to decide who belongs," she'd tell them. "It's to make sure everyone feels like they do." One evening, as she locked up the front desk for the night, she glanced at the plant, now sprouting tiny green leaves, and the drawing still bright on the board. She thought about how one rainy day had unraveled her certainty, shaken her pride, and rebuilt something better in its place. She wasn't perfect. She still had off days, still got frustrated, still made mistakes. But now, when she looked at a guest walking in with worn shoes or tired eyes, she didn't see a problem to manage. She saw a person, and that made all the difference. Months later, the Crestmere Hotel felt different, not in the way you could point to, but in the way you could feel. The lobby still gleamed, the chandeliers still sparkled, but there was a warmth now, a quiet hum of care that hadn't been there before. Guests lingered longer in the seating areas. Staff exchanged real smiles, not just practiced ones. And at the front desk, a small potted plant thrived beside a child's drawing of a rainbow over a hotel. Two quiet reminders that kindness leaves roots. The Second Chance Stay program had grown beyond what anyone expected. It wasn't flashy. There were no banners or press releases. But word had spread through shelters, community centers, even bus stations. If you're in a tight spot, Crestmere might just have a room with your name on it. No paperwork, no judgment. Just a door that opens when the world feels like it's closing in. Trina had become one of the program's strongest voices. She trained new hires not just on check-in procedures, but on listening, really listening. "You never know what someone's carrying," she'd say. "Sometimes the quietest guest is the one who needs the most." She still remembered the sting of her own mistake, and that kept her humble. But more than that, she remembered the grace the Henderson family had shown her, even when she hadn't deserved it. That was the lesson she carried forward. Then, on a crisp autumn afternoon, the automatic doors slid open again. The family walked in like they belonged, which, in a way, they did. The kids were taller now, wearing school uniforms and carrying backpacks stuffed with books. The parents looked rested, confident, like people who'd finally caught their breath after a long storm. They weren't here for a free room this time. They'd booked a standard double, paid in full with a credit card that hadn't existed the first time they'd walked through those doors. Trina saw them the moment they entered. Her heart did that little skip it always did when she saw them. She stepped out from behind the desk before they even reached it. "You're back," she said, smiling. "We are," the mother replied. "Anniversary trip. First night away from the kids' new school routine." Trina nodded, already pulling up their reservation. But instead of handing them the usual key cards, she paused. "I've got something better," she said. "Suite 904 just opened up. Parkview, complimentary breakfast. On the house, from management and from me." The father started to protest, but the mother placed a hand on his arm. She looked at Trina and said, "Thank you, that's more than kind." As they followed the bellhop to the elevators, the little girl turned and pointed to the drawing still pinned near the front desk. "You kept it." "Always," Trina called back. Upstairs, the suite was exactly as promised. Soft light, fresh flowers on the table, a handwritten welcome note. The family unpacked slowly, savoring the quiet luxury of a night with no worries. Later, they ordered room service, real meals this time, not just toast, and sat by the window watching the city lights come alive. Downstairs, Elias watched from the mezzanine. He didn't approach. He didn't need to. He'd seen enough. The way Trina greeted them like old friends. The way the family walked in like they'd never been made to feel small. That was the victory. Not a policy change or a program launch, but a moment of human connection restored. The next morning, before checkout, the mother left a small envelope at the front desk. Inside was a photo. The whole family standing in front of their new apartment building, smiling like they'd finally found solid ground. On the back, she'd written, "Because someone opened a door, we found a home." Trina taped it to the bulletin board, right beside the drawing and the growing plant. Over the following weeks, the ripple kept spreading. Other hotels in the chain began adopting similar approaches. Not because they were told to, but because staff who'd visited Crestmere came back inspired. "They treat people like people," one manager said during a regional meeting. Not transactions. Elias never forced it. He simply shared stories like the one about the family who came in soaked and left with hope. He believed that real change didn't come from top-down orders, but from moments that shift a heart. One evening, long after the lobby had quieted, Elias sat alone in the lounge with a cup of tea. Trina walked by on her way out and paused. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He gestured to the chair across from him. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft hum of the building settling for the night. "You know," Trina said finally, "I used to think hospitality was about making everything perfect. Clean rooms, fast service, flawless appearances. And now?" Elias asked. "Now I think it's about making space for mess, for mistakes, for second chances, for people exactly as they are." Elias smiled. "That's the hardest part, and the most important." They didn't say much after that, but they didn't need to. A few days later, a young man walked into the hotel with a torn backpack and tired eyes. He approached the front desk hesitantly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be there. Trina looked up, saw the uncertainty in his posture, and met his gaze with calm warmth. "Long day?" she asked. He nodded. "Missed my ride. Got nowhere to go." Without hesitation, she typed something into her computer. "We've got a room for you," she said. "No charge. Just rest." He blinked, stunned. "Why?" Trina smiled gently. "Because someone once did the same for me." And just like that, the circle continued, not with grand gestures, but with quiet acts of seeing, of choosing kindness over convenience, of remembering that everyone carries a story you can't see just by looking. From his office window high above, Elias watched the young man follow a staff member toward the elevators. He didn't feel pride. He felt hope, because in the end, no policy could enforce compassion. No training video could guarantee empathy. But sometimes, just sometimes, a moment of shame met with grace could awaken something real in a person. And that person could change a room, a hotel, maybe even a life. The Crestmere wasn't perfect, but it was trying. And in a world that often moves too fast to care, that was enough.